Well, hello YouTube, it's me, Fortmaster, and welcome to a new reaction, and this is a strongly worded defense of Rose Quarts by Cherry Treats Art. And this was a request I got from Elimo1049, and, oh god, I haven't actually watched anything about, Steven Universe any long time. I was a pretty avid fan while the show was still, like, the original show was ongoing. Though even then, I got pretty angry with it later on in the show when the quality started dipping, when everything started getting weirdly compressed and stretched at the same time. Then afterwards, I saw a good chunk of the movie, but never, got around to seeing the entire thing, and never really watched Steven Universe Future, in its entirety. By that point, I had kind of fallen off the wagon pretty hard. I remember all of the discourse. The entire time, the series was going on, I remember how each new revelation we learned about Rose Quarts, who ended up being picked Diamond, people got more and more angry about. Like, oh, I can't believe she actually did this. She was hiding this, and honestly, granted, I'm looking at this video, and this video is 5 years old at this point. I remember seeing somebody say it, and I'm like 100% with them when we say that we basically saw, Rose Quartz' character development in reverse. We saw how she was just before, Steven was born and she ended up dying, but then we kind of, learned who she was backwards, from there, and the fact that we saw her development in reverse kind of mixed up a lot of people's feelings about her. God, thinking back, I still remember the reactions to when it was revealed that, Rose actually was Pink Diamond. And it's one of those things that, I can't believe a theory that had been kind of hanging on for that long and actually, been confirmed true. Honestly, that, and, oh god, I'm forgetting the episode name. The episode where Steven and Connie are at the form of Stevani, and they're trapped on, the moon, and they go into, an old gem building, and they have a dream where they're, in the place of Pink Diamond. That, with the reveal of Rose Quartz as Pink Diamond, have to be, equal parts, both my favorite points in the show. Again, I wish Steven Universe hadn't been kind of squashed as it was. Honestly, and let's thinking back, to how Steven Universe ended, and the fact that near the end it was just so rushed. I remember when the show first started out, there was so much build up to Pink Diamond. And then there was a little bit less build up to Blue Diamond. And there was, so much theorizing and, little hints about White Diamond. But then literally, with White Diamond, it was, virtually nothing, and then everything in the span of 2 or 3 episodes. It was absolutely nuts. And oh god, I wish the show had been a little better paced near the end there, where we actually got some, more build up and more stuff like that. Because the end, while it was epic, especially with the fight where they fuse into obsidian, it was just so out of nowhere is the thing. Ugh. But yeah, I guess we should probably see what this video is going to be about. So yeah, we should probably get this thing started. So of course, as always, original video is linked in the description. If you haven't seen it for some reason, corner video will lead to my Let's Play of the day. And if you like this video or any other video that I make, I'd very much appreciate it if you gave the video a like and subscribe to my channel, because almost 3/4 of the people who watch my content aren't subscribed to my channel, and I'd very much like that to change, because my main goal for this year is to hopefully hit 10,000 subscribers. But yeah, with all that out of the way, let's get this thing started then, shall we?
Okay. I was originally going to make this a 3-part sort of series about the Steven Universe movie and the show as a whole that could have been summed up with Stag is bad, Diamonds are worse, Rose is good, everybody stop. But I didn't want my first 3 big videos on this channel to be overtly negative criticism. I'm a relatively positive person most of the time, and most of my criticisms on both Steg and the Diamonds have been repeated ad nauseum from hundreds of different fans. So I'm fine letting innuendo and space Nazis lie. But what I haven't heard much of is defense of Rose Quartz, as people are leaning towards scapegoating her over addressing the Diamonds in any reasonable capacity. And her story is important to me, so let's jump right into this argument. There has been a long-growing side of the Steven Universe community, and to an extent its creators, that have been cornering the character of Rose Quarts into the true main antagonist of the show and the secret villain among villains. I mean, just the worst. Look at her. She abandoned everyone. She strung Pearl along and basically abused her, locked away Bismuth because she's so selfish. She should have just admitted she was Pink Diamond. Like, look how sad she made Blue Diamond.
Oh god, yeah, okay, this is bringing back so many memories. Again, the fact that people were so quick to just forgive the diamonds. Like forgetting, the whole fact, as Cherry stated, space Nazis, essentially. I mean, you have to, Diamond Civilization is kind of whack. I mean, remember when Steven walks through? We see literal wall panels with faces, because those are gems whose one and only goal is to literally be the walls. They don't get to do anything else. They don't have a life, they don't have friends, that's just them. And, the whole thing, I mean, granted, I know it's a whole part of the, gem reproduction, but remember the fact that, bringing gems to life kind of sucks the life out of a planet, rendering it rendering it impossible for it to form life. I mean, I don't think we ever actually learned if that was a thing where they had to use plants that had life on them already. But I mean, going back to that flashback dream thing I was talking about with Stevani. I mean, we literally see Yellow Diamond commanding an invasion fleet of a planet. Presumably one with life if, it has to be an invasion fleet. So I mean, I don't know if it was ever, outright stated, was there no possibility for them to just use planets that were either barren or lifeless? You could have gone around reproduction by just doing that. Again, probably going to be brought up in the video. Let's, keep going.
She left Spinel on purpose. The humans, the real Rose Quartzes. And then she left everyone to make Steven just so she could run away from her problems. Clearly, everything she has ever done was in her own self-interest and cowardice. The Steven Universe movie seems to be the final nail in the coffin for the majority of fans to see her this way. And this is it. This is the hill I have to die on, because this is embarrassing.
Yeah.
Here's the too long don't read it.
Again, I never saw the full movie. I've seen, a good portion of it through clips, but again...
The beginning of the video. Rose did barely anything wrong. Everything people blame her for is solely the Diamond's fault. Fight me. Okay, so I'm going to start with the complete list of everything the narrative and the fandom collectively see as her fault, and her being selfish or manipulative, and work my way through them all.
Okay, here we go.
Some individuals who talk about Rose in relation to these issues to keep myself from creating a straw man, but I want to be clear that I'm not upset at any of these people. Interpreting a piece of fiction differently than me isn't a cause for war, no matter how much fandom might imply as such.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So the general consensus is that Rose is morally gray, and her crimes are: she didn't tell the rebellion of her status as a diamond, she bubbled bismuth and told no one, she faked her own death, and that caused every gem on Earth to be corrupted, she left Spinel alone on purpose for 6,000 years, she left Pink Pearl in a similar manner, her real death was selfish and she just abandoned everyone, and she left Steven to deal with all of her problems. So.
I mean, that last one, I can definitely see, certain points of view for most of those, but that last one, that one's the flummiest, mainly because from everything we've seen, near the end of her life, essentially, Rose was very obsessed with, how life on Earth worked. The fact that it changed and grew and stuff like that. So I saw her as, being, very, wanting to be a part of that. She found a way to get herself pregnant, even if that meant literally her own life. But, saying that she had Steven just so he'd have to fix all her problems. I mean, from everything we saw, until Steven came along, or until, Steven and Greg came along into the Gems' lives, they were living a pretty idyllic, if boring, existence. Of course they went out and, captured, the corrupted gems and the gem monsters that were, still, going around Earth. But other than that, their life was just there on the beach. I mean, they even built the house later on for Steven and stuff like that. Like, I don't think Rose expected Homeworld to ever actually come back. Because, like, as we, find out later on, they had no idea that Homeworld had created the cluster on Earth as a way to, like, destroy it just outright. They were under the impression, I assume Rose was too, that Homeworld would just never come back because they had been gone for literal millennia. So why would that suddenly change?
When you list it off like this, it sure does seem like Rose Quartz is a selfish brat, huh? But here's the thing. Hardly any of this is even true, and the rest is far more nuanced than anyone gives it credit for. I'll start with her choosing to keep her status a secret, since, from my perspective, this leads to the only real character mistake she ever makes, and not even like you'd think. And to be clear, I'm separating character mistakes from things that went wrong. A character mistake is a decision or action that a character makes due to a flaw in themselves, something they have to grow out of and admit was wrong. Where something that went wrong is just an event that worked out incorrectly. For example, Lapis taking pleasure in hurting Jasper versus Peridot stealing the communicator to try and reason with Yellow Diamond. The first is something Lapis had to address and grow away from, and admit was unhealthy. The second was a tactical error coming from a good mental space on Peridot's part.
Yeah.
When Rose first got Earth as a colony and she found that what they were doing would kill it and that she didn't want to do that, we see her try and stop the colonization through what little actual power she had, to no avail. And we've seen how controlling, physically abusive, and threatening the Diamonds are to her. When she decides to take a stand, with the only goal of freeing Earth, herself, and Pearl, she takes on a persona for some very obvious reasons. At the beginning, she has no army or allies, and the Diamonds could individually destroy her, or, more honestly, destroy Pearl, in less than a moment if they discover that she was defecting.
Yeah, that's definitely one of those things, because, I mean, for all this time, like, she was living the double life until she faked her own death. And, I mean, of course you have the whole troop angle there. Because which you think would be more inspiring, given the whole hierarchical, not just hierarchical, like extremely hierarchical, civilization that that Homeworld had. Who do you think would attract more, troops and allies? The side where the leader is one of the original oligarchs who wants to break off and do their own thing away from the main hierarchical society, or the one where you see a gem, a normal gem, not like the top of the top diamonds, break away and say, this isn't right, we want to do our own thing. I mean, on the first option is just some sort of like run-of-the-mill power grab, while the other one is just outright revolution.
Taking Earth away from her forever and permanently damaging a lot of people she cares about. Starting the rebellion as Pink Diamond means it wouldn't have started at all. Not only did she have to make the rebellion come off as inconsequential to the other Diamonds, but keeping her position as the coordinator of the colony allowed her to sabotage on both sides.
Right, okay, yeah, that's very important. I didn't even think of that. Because the whole idea of making sure that the rest of the Diamonds thought it was inconsequential means that you don't have Homeworld bringing the entirety of its forces to bear.
Making it a really smart move, and also the only option. Rose had to be overly cautious about being found out, because, as has been demonstrated many times by all three Diamonds, they regularly use the threat of hurting people she cares about as a punishment for her stepping out of line. This kind of display of violence is a tactic abusive parents use to demonstrate something very specific. Parents violently destroy their child's things and what they care about to say, very plainly, next time, this will be you.
God, yeah, that's one of those things. And Grant, I remember, very early on, my whole headcanon more was that all the Diamonds were like sisters. And I guess you could also have, abusive older siblings that have very much the same thing. Like the same relationship, but like I liked seeing them as like all the Diamonds were sisters, and they were supposed to be equal, but then they never ended up actually being equal. But the idea that, Pink Diamond being the child, Yellow and Blue being the parents, and then White being like the grandparents, like the grandmother or whatever. Like, I mean, I don't like it, but apparently it's what happens.
The Diamonds did this with Pink Pearl, and made it very clear that any gem that Rose cared about is at risk in the same way. The humans they held hostage, Pearl, the Pebbles, Spinel, it was imperative that the Diamonds specifically did not find out who Rose was. But you may ask, why didn't she tell the rebellion once it gathered, Cherry? They deserved the truth. Because of gems like bismuth. The larger rebellion was formed under the goal of escaping homeworld dictatorship. Crystal gems enthusiastic about shattering a diamond were definitely not going to be in the minority.
Yeah.
And they weren't wrong. Let me be clear. Revolting against violent fascism is good, and redeeming space Nazis is not the right call. But this is a different topic. What matters is that they were in the middle of a war, and Pink Diamond was the symbolic figurehead of their enemy, and Rose had every reason to believe that coming clean at this point would likely be disastrous.
And you know what? I very much agree with her on that one. For all like the talk that she made bad decisions, that is seemingly the very right decision.
Which leads to bismuth. How could she bubble bismuth and not even tell anyone? Well, let me ask you this. If bismuth was enthusiastically showing Rose a weapon meant specifically for her alter ego, and when she disagreed, bismuth was ready to kill her right on the dime, why do you think Rose telling bismuth, "It's because I am Pink Diamond," would make the gem currently trying to kill her, as Rose, want to kill her any less? And after that, how does one tell the rebellion, who, as previously explained, she also can't reveal her identity to, why their comrade tried to murder her?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, it's easier just to say, oh, she fell in battle or was shattered or whatever, because again, you were literally fighting a war. You know, losses are an expected thing.
Can anyone tell me what Rose should have done here? Because what I see is a really hard situation with no right answer. Bismuth wasn't wrong. Rose wasn't wrong. But the context couldn't be explained at the time. And
Yeah.
the best she could do was try and keep bismuth in stasis until things calmed down and she could explain. But after the diamond attack, that was never going to happen. Now, here...
Yeah. Oh, hey, bismuth. Yeah, sorry, I'm telling you what happened now. I'm actually Pink Diamond. Because of my decisions, literally every other gem on the planet has been corrupted. Yeah, I can definitely see that going over well.
Here is where I think Rose really did mess up. Pretty bad. After she tried to end the war by faking her death, after everything was over, she didn't tell Garnet and she didn't unbubble bismuth. That was a mistake on her part. Everything had gone wrong in the second worst way possible, and Rose kept her secret in shame indefinitely.
Oh god, yeah, the whole like covering mouth thing with Pearl. Oh god, that was horrible when that revelation came about.
When she decided to have Stephen 6,000 years later, she clearly left bismuth for him to find, but that wasn't enough. Garnet and bismuth deserved to have that hard conversation, and she was being cowardly by trying to avoid it. Now, let's talk about the end of the war, shall we? Firstly, no one...
God, the screaming into lava. God, I remember that. It was such a good scene.
Tell me it's Rose's fault that the gems were corrupted. I'm going to go fucking apeshit. The diamonds did that. Literally and directly. Fuck you if you blame Rose for not predicting her abusive parents' crazy fucking behavior.
Yeah, granted, they are crazy, but I don't think she imagined them being so crazy as to launch their species equivalent to a nuke.
And her reasoning for faking her shattering was sound logic to end the war. It was incorrect, but from the context she had, it was the best shot. The crystal gems were vastly outnumbered and were only staying afloat by keeping the other diamonds uninvolved, which means even if they could start doing more effective damage, it would only cause the full force of yellow and blue to wipe them out in a moment.
Yeah.
The rebellion was painted into a corner. Either be slowly eliminated by virtue of running out of time, or be immediately obliterated by a force magnitudes more powerful than them and willing to shatter. But to Rose, from how they treat her and what she knows about the diamonds, she thinks the only way to effectively get the planet free without involving the diamonds directly And her only chance to personally escape her abuse is to get rid of her. She didn't think the diamonds had any real attachment to her, and that if she made it impossible to justify the cost of the fight, they would move on logically. That's what the perfect diamond authority would do.
Oh, God, yeah, that's the whole thing. Such an abusive relationship. You can't even think that, that your abusers actually have any feelings for you in the first place. They've killed, and then, they've gone from crazy, fascist, empire leader to, oh no, to crying parent, like, oh no, they've killed my baby, drop the nukes. God, if there wasn't any more proof needed for the fact that the diamonds were unstable.
See it as a minor, irrelevant loss. She didn't expect petty, violent revenge, but that's how abusive parents are. Unpredictable, spiteful, terrifying. She tried her best, but she's fighting brutality incarnate. There was no clean solution. Jesus, it's hard to talk about how actively sadistic the diamonds are. So now that we're past everything that happened in the war, let's keep talking about exactly that. So people also cite Rose leaving behind Spinel and Pink Pearl as evidence for her being selfish and fickle, and how she doesn't have empathy or respect for others, postulating that she sees other beings like toys. Well, what if I told you that you're all fucking stupid? Pink Pearl was and has been under direct control of White Diamond, and is more than likely like that because Rose upset the diamonds in some minor way, and it was another one of those previously mentioned shows of violent force as a direct threat.
Yeah, I can definitely... and again, we have no idea. Did Pink ever try to get, Pink Pearl back? I assume maybe once or twice, but... Yeah, given the fact she was under the direct command and control of White Diamond, I don't think that would have worked out that well.
There was literally nothing she could do for Pink Pearl. White Diamond is a monster. Now, Spinel. I can't tell you why Rose never went back to the garden for Spinel, but I can definitely tell you that you don't know either. We have only heard Spinel's perspective of this event, which was Rose telling her to stay still, promising she'd be back, and then not coming back. We can clearly see how this is not the full story, but we all, myself included, were empathizing so hard with Spinel during that scene that we didn't really notice that. Now, I'm going to propose a scenario, one that is just speculation, but is quite in character with context.
Just before this, my always headcanon for everything with this would potentially be the fact that maybe, after thinking about it long and hard, maybe, I'm just going to call her Rose for the sake of simplicity, maybe she just came to the conclusion that, she couldn't trust, not in a malicious way, but, we see Spinel before she, thinks snap and she goes all villain for the movie, but, she's literally designed to be Pink's plaything. She's supposed to be, a toy, or, a playhouse friend, or something like that. I can very much believe that Rose thought that, hey, I can't trust, Spinel to not let the secret out, and not take this seriously. And so she just left her there, thinking it's hey, it's better that she's there, not potentially ruining my secret.
We saw in Spinel's flashback that Rose was given the news that she would get Earth in the garden, and her leaving was her first time to Earth. Blue and Yellow were both at what seemed to be the Earth moon base, telling her that this is a very serious thing, and telling her to come there to be debriefed. So imagine, Rose knows that they're expecting her to take this seriously, something Spinel definitely is not. She decides to go to the moon base alone first to show the diamonds that she isn't there to play, and she's not going to take it lightly. She promises Spinel she'll be right back, and if she stays still, she'll get a prize, and goes to get debriefed on how to run a colony.
And then never comes
Blue
back.
And Yellow to lock her from the garden warp pad when she gets there. When she objects, Yellow says something along the lines of, "You wanted a colony and now you've got it. This is a serious job and you're a diamond. It is time you prove that you can act like it." To which Blue follows, "You can play with your Spinel after you've finished your colony. We just want to make sure you stay focused. White needs to be impressed."
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's something I had kind of forgotten. Again, going back to the whole thing that, the fact that the Homeworld Empire, rather fascistic and stuff like that. Um, I had completely forgotten the fact that, the diamonds didn't really see any other gems as people. Like, quite literally. Like, okay, it's just, as I'm saying this, I literally just remember that one scene in, again, going back to the whole thing where there were gems whose only existence was the walls. Like, I remembered there was the one scene when, in, like, Blue's bathtub pool thing, where there's a gem who's literally just her comb, whose only existence is to sing while Blue's combing her hair. Yeah, it's like honestly, thinking about it, the more I say, like, it seemed more like the fact that, the entirety of Homeworld was simply just the diamonds and then everything else that was theirs. There was nobody else in the Empire, technically.
And then the rebellion starts, never giving her the ability to go back for Spinel, just like the humans and the Rose Quarts Blue and Yellow took hostage. Again, this is just speculation, but we have no actual reason to believe she intended to leave Spinel permanently. From
it's not like we can ask her.
When you're escaping an abusive household, especially one where you're being physically beaten or you're actively unsafe, you don't always have the power to bring everyone with you. There are people, friends, pets, siblings, you can't take with you, who are being hurt in the same circumstances, but you can't blame yourself for getting away in the situation that they're left in. That's survivor's guilt, and it's not healthy. Enough about Homeworld and about Rose's origins. What about what she did on Earth? You can't use abuse as an excuse for more abuse, Jerry. But can you tell me what she did after the war that was even actually bad? At all? She lived with the remaining crystal gems for 6,000 years happily, all of them doing their best to keep the victims of the diamond attack safe and bubbled. She had several relationships with humans while maintaining her romantic involvement with Pearl, and is that it? Is that what she did selfishly? Pearl has been shown from our perspective to not really have been on board with Rose having romantic relationship with humans. And to us, she was clearly not on board with Rose having a child. But we've also seen Pearl telling Rose the literal opposite every single time. In It's Over, Isn't It?, Pearl says that she was fine with Rose having previous relationships before Greg, and we can postulate that she told Rose as much before Greg.
I mean, yeah, it basically boils down to the fact that, for, again, Gem's perspective, they're basically immortal. So, I mean, from Pearl's perspective, what's a century, or that if I'm not the center of attention? Like, I have her for the rest of time, and then Steven shows up.
But we also saw that she never directly told Rose she was uncomfortable with him. All of her dissent went passive-aggressively to Greg, never directly in view of Rose. And Pearl not communicating with Rose on a level field is a problem. Up until the very end, Pearl put Rose on a pedestal. Even as Rose did her best to drive home that they were equals now, Pearl never got past to this ideation. And this only perpetuated Rose taking a long time to properly learn social interaction and how to be more tact and considerate. They both needed to grow on this, and Greg was a really good catalyst for them both on that. It's not entirely Pearl's fault that Rose didn't notice her passive cues, and that she wasn't on board with polyamory, but it's also not Rose's fault that Pearl was lying to her about it. They're bad at this.
Yeah, as it's God, this is bringing back so many memories of when I was, actually in the fandom. But that was like one of the things where it's like, that was as it's later shown and later talked about in like Steven Universe Future. But the fact that like almost all of the crystal gems needed to go to therapy, and they used Steven essentially as their therapist. None of them were really like, they were all pretty good, but a lot of them, like, they all had massive flaws that they needed to work through.
In Rose's own words, we've been told that gems can't be kids. They can't grow up. But the point of the whole show is that that assumption is incorrect. Gems are just as able to grow and learn naturally when given the choice. It's Homeworld that forces gems to be what they're supposed to be immediately. And as for Rose choosing to give up her life to make Steven, how was that selfish? Jesus Christ, everyone who talks about this one acts like she did this as a fucking surprise. We were shown her consulting with the gems on this, and Greg definitely had to fucking agree, guys. Holy shit. Nobody, including Rose, knew the details about how this would play out. Rose thought she would become half of Steven. Amethyst thought it was going to be an elaborate shapeshift. Garnet thought it would be a new type of fusion. They were all walking into the unknown, but they all gave the thumbs up on it.
Yeah, because, I mean, at the end of the day, this was literally the first of its kind. I mean, literal species hybridization here. I mean, you're going into really uncharted territory.
Pearl was lying about being on board, but as I said, that's not on Rose. Now, the final thing people admonish Rose for is that she had Steven as a way to run away from her problems and left Steven to pick up the pieces.
I said my thoughts on this earlier in the video, but again, just to reiterate, I mean, from everything we saw, it very much seemed like they didn't expect Homeworld ever coming back. So I'm pretty certain that, you know, Rose thought it would be safe for Steven to just, you know, do his thing.
And that's just not true. It had been hammered home that Rose wanted to create life just for the sake of creating life. Something that she had been fascinated and in love with since before she was given Earth. Rose was on aerial levels of passionate about anthropology and biology. The secret room that Steven found on Homeworld was where she was doing her own experiments to create the pebbles. The only reason she wanted a colony at all was to see life get created. She defended the Earth because the natural life there left her in awe. That is who she is. Someone who is absolutely in love with life and individuality. Of course she wanted to have a child. But I would agree that she did plan to have Steven deal with some of her mistakes. One mistake. Bismuth. The only real character mistake she ever made. She left Bismuth in Lion with Steven's tape, knowing that he'd find it and hoping that now that everything was settled, now that she thought Homeworld was gone for good and there was no threat, that Steven and the Crystal Gems could set the record straight and give Bismuth back her freedom. But she and no Crystal Gem knew that Homeworld was coming back. They had no idea about the cluster or its imminent emergence. It had been 6,000 years.
Literally what I said earlier.
Homeworld, and they all thought that they were safe. Rose didn't want Steven to deal with any of this. So, yeah. Rose did hardly anything wrong and tried her best. She's not morally gray. She's not a villain. She's a child who saved a planet, grew up, had a kid, and became a scapegoat for her abusers.
As I said before, we saw it was. I am fairly certain that if we had seen, you know, Pink Diamond's development happening forward, none of this was happening. But the fact is that at the beginning of the show, we're given this like this perfect version of like what everybody says Rose was like, and then throughout the series, we essentially see, you know, how she got to that point. We see her character development in reverse, and I'm certain that if, you know, that wasn't the case, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Though then again, I'm talking as if this video isn't half a decade old, so I have no idea if these conversations are still even happening.
What's the moral here? Fuck White Diamond.
Oh, God. Oh, God, yeah, so... You know, one of these days I might have to actually watch Steven Universe Future, because, again, the only parts I've seen were various clips from, like, the part where he's in the hospital getting an x-ray, and you see all, like, the past fractures from his life, and the part where, like, he has a crash out in the car with his dad saying he wished he had his dad's childhood, and then there's the one where he turns into the monster. That's definitely, again, wonderful video. Thank you for suggesting it. I'm sorry it took me a while to actually get to this, but yeah, that's definitely going to be it for now. So yeah, I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you have not, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.